The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, can you hear me? Just type in the question box, just making sure everything's working properly. Awesome. All right, it's 7 o'clock. I'm going to give it just a few more seconds. We have 15 registered and only 7 are on, so we'll just give it one more minute. And then we'll get started. Thanks for joining me on in 7 o'clock in the evening when most of us are probably ready to be on the couch resting by now. It's super weird talking to you guys and not hearing anything back. It's like I'm talking to myself. Kind of strange. I'm going to move this little bar out of the screen, this little box. If you have any questions, just type them into the box and I'll try to look down and see them as we're going along. And then at the end, I think I'll be able to see all the questions at the end. So I'm going to move this guy out of here. All right, so let's get started. It's 7:01, strength training, that extra 1%. All right, here we go. So first of all, just talking a little bit about where we're coming from, who are we? QT2 Systems started about 13 years ago by Jesse Kropelnicki. He's still our head guy. And since then, we've added 4 additional brands under our umbrella. The Core Diet was the first one to come right after QT2, and that's our diet. All of our dietitians, they're registered dietitians, and they specialize in sports nutrition, and they put a lot of research and time into making out our nutrition plans, fueling plans for all of our athletes, as well as making sure they're on top of what's the latest and greatest in the world of sports nutrition. Then we acquired Outrival a few years ago, and a lot of you are being coached under Outrival as well as QT2. That's another triathlon coaching avenue that we have. And then we also have, most recently, our newest babies are the Run Formula, which is run coaching only, and then Cycling Formula, which is coaching for people who are specializing in just bike racing. So we're kind of well-rounded, and we have a little something for everyone. So combined, you can see, I'm sure you guys can read for yourselves, but combined with all of our coaches, these are successes that we've had. Next, who am I? I used to be a teacher, and I was also a registered nurse at one time. I have not currently, but I was a certified personal trainer for over 9 years. I worked at Gold's for about 6 or 7 years, and while I was there, I also taught group exercise as well as managed the group exercise program. I've been teaching group exercise for 13 years. I've been coaching, I think, 10 or 11 years now for coaching triathlon. The things I've taught in the past and currently teach are strength training classes, spin classes, and high intensity interval training classes. A few years ago, I discontinued personal training. I came on board full-time with QT2, taking on some additional duties outside of coaching, which is educating any new coaches that come on board with us, as well as most recently, I took up on managing our QT2 and Outrival triathlon teams. that's a little bit about me. I also have 3 kids and a husband. 2 of my kids are in college and 1 is still at home. So if you've seen any of our webinars, you know we always start with this slide. The 5 cornerstones of QT2. The first one is training, and that's everything we do day in and day out. It's our swimming, our biking, our running, our strength training, anything we do to prepare the body for battle. In addition to training, still just as important is the things we put into our body, our fuel, the gas that makes our bodies go, as well as rest, sleeping, napping, and just quiet time, which I know most of us don't get enough of. These 2 things, 3 if you want to include rest, includes the preparation for racing. This is everything we do to lead up to our race day. Next is race fueling. This is things we need to practice in training day in and day out. We need to train our gut. We need to get our stomachs ready to handle the amount of calories and liquid that we are going to put into our body on race day. And then, of course, on race day, also just as important as race fueling is being sure that we follow our pacing plans, we stick to our heart rates or our power zones or our run pace, and we don't get carried away in those first few miles thinking, I feel great, and we just blow it all out in those first miles. Those 2 fall under the category of race execution. And then finally, our 5th cornerstone is mental fitness. This is training of the mind. We spend a lot of time training our bodies and figuring out what to put inside of our bodies on race day. But a lot of times one thing that's missing is mental fitness. And that's just really as important as having the physical training and the nutrition to have the best race outcome that you can have. So following all these 5 cornerstones, of course, tonight's presentation on strength training is falling under number 1, training. Of course, you know, we have to always say this, but before starting any strength training program, make sure you consult your physician or physical therapist to be sure you have everything in place and that you're healthy enough to get into the gym and do this strength training. I always like to recommend also, if you've never been around a gym, if you haven't had any experience with the machines or the free weights, it's always a wise investment to purchase a few personal trainer sessions just so you know that you're using proper form. And a lot of the gyms, the bigger gyms, do give you a few free sessions in the beginning when you purchase your membership just to make sure that you are using the equipment and the free weights safely and using proper form. Of course, I'm sure you can use your common sense and know if you're not doing these properly and you're, you know, putting, you know, your joints in the wrong position, that it can definitely lead to injury. And of course, obviously, if you do have any chronic or acute injuries and you are working with a coach, a triathlon coach or a strength training coach, or anyone that's working with you on your strength program, it's very important to be honest and upfront about any past issues, any current issues that you have going on with your body. So these are some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. Just as with triathlon training, I'm going to correlate the strength training as we do with our triathlon training. So different coaches call different stages of training by different names, but basically it's every stage of training is fairly similar. So what we at QT2 and Outrival do is the beginning of stages, and the beginning of the triathlon training is called base. And depending on the distance of the race, depending on the volume the athlete has been doing up until the start of training, all varies on how long the base stage lasts. I like to call the base stage, if you've ever watched a house being built, the base stage is the foundation of the home. It's not super exciting stage of training. It's not a super exciting stage of watching a house being built, the foundation, the cement that's being poured. However, it really is the most important stage because this is when we're getting our body ready for the demands of training to come, and it's getting us the durability that we need. It's strengthening our soft tissues and our muscles to progress us in a safe manner. So during base stage, the types of training we use is adaptation, and that will be the first 2 weeks of training, and then max strength would last approximately 6 weeks, and these are all in base stage. Next in triathlon training we call is build stage. Build is like the walls are like the walls and the roof of a house, still a very integral part of the house and very important part of triathlon training. This is where we work in each discipline to build strength in our legs and our arms and our core. Some of the things we like to incorporate as coaches, we like to see paddle work done in the pool. We like to see low cadence intervals on the bike, building up that leg strength, and then hill repeats on the run. And these are all things that are going to make us strong, but in a sports specific way. And outside of the gym, it's building our strength. Inside of the gym, we move into a more sports specific strength type of training, and we will obviously get into that in just a little bit. And then finally, we get into the peak stage or the anaerobic stage of training. This comes at the very end of training. Sometimes for Ironman training, we may not even get to the anaerobic stage of training, just depending on the athlete. So I like to call this, when we're building a house, I like to call this the pretty stuff inside. It's the stuff that is really important in training, but you could live without it if you're injured, if you're a master's athlete, if you're training for Ironman. Like I said, you may not do that anaerobic work, that high intensity interval training. So this is where we build speed. So in the gym, it gets a little bit less intense, I guess you could say. We may still continue on with some sport specific strength exercises, and that's also when we start to incorporate the TRX and the plyometrics. During taper and race week, I would usually recommend athletes to rest and recover and take strength training out those final 2 weeks or so before race, just to make sure you're not damaging anything and you're getting rid of all that muscle fatigue. So tonight, quickly, like I already said, we're going to be covering functional assessment, the adaptation stage of training, moving into maximum strength training, followed by sport-specific training, and then the TRX and plyometrics. The first thing we're going to talk about are functional assessments. This is a little bit outside of strength training, and it can be very vast, so we're just going to touch on it tonight. Honestly, we could make a whole webinar on this in itself. So functional assessments are things you need to do. You usually have to have someone watching you, whether it's a coach or maybe a family member, someone that works in the gym. And these are really just looking at movement patterns, looking for tightness in the body, looking for instability, mobility issues, things that can lead to injury later down the line, and things that we can improve upon with different types of mobility exercises and strength exercises. So the time of season that we would do this is really ongoing, but especially important before starting your strength training program. That can kind of lead you into some extra exercises you may need to do or some specific limiters you need to work on. Some of the assessments we use as coaches, and obviously they're listed here. If you are one of our QT2 athletes, we have videos on all of these that you can find in your member area. If you're not one of our athletes, you can reach out to me, and if you want to see any of these videos, I can send them to you. I'm just going to show you one as an example. For each type of strength training, I'm going to show you a sample video from our library. So these are some of the things we use. Obviously, you can see we're testing for our upper back and shoulder. We're testing our spine, which leads into our hip flexors. We're testing our hamstrings and different things like that. So let's just go over to our member area, and we're going to take a look at the standing pelvic tilt test. So we're over here in our member area for QT2. Anybody, like I said, that's an athlete for QT2 and Arrival has all these videos in their member area. So we are going to look at the pelvic tilt test right, where did it go? We might be in the wrong section here. Why is it not coming up? Oh, here it is. Standing pelvic tilt test. I was looking for the P. All right, here we go. So that shows you a little bit of our assessments and how we look for athletes. And then from that point, we would assign certain stretching exercises, foam rolling, different stretches to take care of those mobility issues. Next, we move into core and prehab exercises, and these are really things that we do all year round. It's ongoing. The core exercises are something you should be doing year round because we use our core for everything we do. And then prehab are some things that will just help us keep mobile and keep stretched. And I'm going to show you tonight, we're going to look at the rotisserie chicken. And a lot of these, again, you can find, if you're not a member, you can find on YouTube, different places like that. So let's go to look at the rotisserie chicken. This is in core prehab area. And we're going to go right down here. So that's just a sample of some prehab exercises. And those are things most of these you can do at home. You don't have to go to the gym for these. I like to tell people, like, put a yoga mat down on the floor in front of your TV, and you're watching your evening shows and a commercial comes on and you get down on your yoga mat and you do a couple of these exercises. Each one of them only takes a few seconds. So now we're going to get into the meat of the webinar, which is the general strength training. And just some tips, except for the adaptation phase, which are those first 2 weeks. All the strength sessions should be completed with your full number of sets or reps that are prescribed. And if you cannot finish your repetitions for a certain set, the next day, the next time, say if you're doing your strength training on Mondays and Wednesdays, the next time on Wednesdays, you're going to use that same weight that you'd use to failure on, let's say, Monday. So let's say, for example, you could not finish your 8 reps of squats at 100 pounds. You're going to continue on Wednesday doing those same sets and those same reps with that same amount of 100 pounds. Let's say you did finish those 8 reps, 3 sets of 8 reps each of the 100-pound squats on Monday. Then on Wednesday, maybe you're going to go to 110 pounds, for example. So that's kind of how we move up in weights each session. And yeah, moving along. So the adaptation phase is the first 2 weeks, like I said, of base training or the beginning of your strength training program. And this is really just to get the body used to training, especially if you haven't been in the gym for a while. It's really super light weights. It's really just going through the motions. When I first started with QT2 as an athlete and I was being coached by Tim Snow, he used to tell me when people walked by me in the gym, they should be laughing at the light amount of weight I was doing. And I would argue that I work in a gym. This is really embarrassing, like, to be doing this low amount of weight. So that is just like embarrassingly light. It's just going through the motions, just preparing the body for what's to come. And this is pretty much what I just said. Adaptation is 3 times a week for 2 weeks. And really each session should only take you 30 to 40 minutes. As triathletes, we're not bodybuilders. We don't want to spend a lot of time in the gym. We want to get the most bang for our buck, and really always strength training sessions should last only 30 to 40 minutes. The rest time in between these adaptation exercises are 1.5 minutes long. Here are some examples of sets and reps that we do, and some sample exercises that we assign our athletes. We try to keep it simple. A lot of the things are with machines, simply because a lot of triathletes don't have a lot of experience in the gym. If triathletes do have experience in the gym, then I'm all for incorporating some of the free weights, the squats, the lunges, step ups, things like that. But to keep it simple and to keep it quick and basic, these are some of the things we do in adaptation. And these are similar to what we're going to lead into with the max strength, just a little bit of more variety. In the maximum strength, our goal here is to get strong. We're using a heavy weight and lower reps. We're using compound exercises, like I said, to get the most bang for your buck. So we're not just sitting there doing bicep curls or shoulder raises. We're trying to use the big muscle group movements, multi-joint movements, and the big muscle groups. Strength training is more important than we think. A lot of people, especially as they get further along in their training, this is the first thing to go. It's the first thing they give up to make time for the swim, bike, and run, when in reality, it's just as important as the actual swimming, biking, and running, because it keeps us strong, which in turn makes us faster, and it also helps us to stay strong to prevent injury. As I said earlier, max strength should be in the base training phase, only because in base training, we're not doing a lot of high intensity intervals, a lot of high intensity work. We are mostly focusing on aerobic building, building up our aerobic system. And so there's not a lot of intensity there. And this is the good time to work on building up strength in the gym, because a lot of times in the beginning of a strength training program, as we all know, we get sore muscles. So there's not a lot of intensity outside of the gym. So this is a good time to really push in the gym. Just some tips for max strength. Warming up becomes even more important when we're lifting heavy. It's always good to do a warm-up set first with super light weight before you start adding all that weight on. We like to recommend that your first warm-up set should be 12 reps at about 50% of what your max is going to be. So again, going back to that 100 pounds, your goals, like pretend 100 pounds on the leg extension machine. So you're going to do a warm-up set that's 12 reps at 50 pounds, and then 3 reps at 75 pounds, and then you're going to go ahead and add that last 25 on, and then start your first set. So that warm-up set is actually a fourth set, but it doesn't actually count with those first 3 sets, or the 3 main sets. Max strength should be done twice a week, and then you should be resting 3 minutes in between each set to allow good recovery, since you are lifting so heavy. Sometimes it's hard to sit still for 3 minutes, and I would get off. I recommend getting off the machine and maybe doing some crunches on a ball or something core related, just to mix in if you're not wanting to sit straight still for 3 minutes. Here are some samples of maximum strength exercises that we assign at QT2 and Outrival. Again, we're going back to it is using a lot of the machines in the gym, and again, I'm telling you because the reason is mainly to keep it simple and to keep it safe. Sport-specific strength phase is sometimes incorporated into that build stage. Depending, and we're going to go at the end of the webinar, we're going to do a sample of week by week of what you would do for an Ironman training program. But sport specific, it's in your build stage. Like I said earlier, we're working outside of the gym as well on building strength with the low cadence work on the bike, the pedal work in the pool, the hill bounding, and the hill repeats on the run. So we're strengthening our muscles in our sport outside of the gym. So now we're going to decrease the intensity in the gym. and it's more of a little bit, you may want to, some people might call it endurance work or maintenance work, but it gets a little more specific. And again, we're still in the gym 1 to 2 times a week. And then the rests drop a little bit since the weight's dropping. So now our rest set between sets is only 2 minutes long. Some examples here, we're using more unilateral movements. We're working on balance. We're working on our stabilizers, different things like that. So you can see we're now, instead of a hack squat, we're doing a single leg lunge. We're doing a standing push down for our lats versus a pull down. We're doing the one-legged squat. We're doing a single leg deadlift. Still using that core work as always, year round on the core work. And you can see the repetitions are increasing because our weights are decreasing. So maybe now for, if you were squatting before 100 pounds, maybe now you're doing 50 or 75. If you're using a normal squat, obviously you're not going to do that same amount if it's a single leg. And then sometimes we're still in the build stage. Sometimes we're getting a little bit more towards the end of build into peak. When we take out the weights altogether and we add in the TRX training, still using your muscle, still getting strong. It's just a time efficient way. A lot of people have these at their homes, so it saves the trip to the gym. This can be done, in your living room, in your garage, in your backyard if you have a tree. And, as the training volume picks up and the intensity picks up at the end, like I said earlier, sometimes that's when people start to neglect going to the gym. So maybe a TRX at their house would be easier and they would be more apt to stick strength training. And the time, even the session time drops on the TRX. You can get this done in 15 to 25 minutes versus the 30 to 40 minutes in the gym. Tips for the TRX. There's some different ways because you can add weight onto the TRX. You can still make it more challenging in different ways, which we'll get into in a second. But just some tips on using the actual TRX. You want to make sure your spine is in neutral. You want to always be engaging your core. And that is one good thing about the TRX, is because a lot of it is suspension work. Your core is constantly being used. Your stabilizers are constantly being used. As far as the straps are concerned on the TRX, you never want them to go slack. You want to always keep them taut and straight in front of you. Now, how do we get that intensity adjusted when we can't add weight to a TRX strap? So changing the angles of the body, sometimes standing up, closer to the wall if it's attached to the wall or the tree, or moving out farther away. Moving the angle of the body changes the intensity one way or the other. And then also changing your stance of your feet. Sometimes if you get them closer together versus farther apart, it makes it a little bit harder. So there's a few things you can do on the TRX to make it more challenging versus in the gym with adding the weights on to make it harder. Here are some sample TRX exercises. We're going to look at one of them out of our library. So these are there's a lot more you can do. These are just some of the more common ones that we happen to assign. If you're not one of our athletes, most of these can be found. You can Google them. You can find them on YouTube. Let's just take a moment and go look at the atomic push-up. I find this to be extremely challenging myself. I have a hard time with these. That's why I chose that one to show you guys. So this is the first one here. So that's a little sample of one of the challenging TRX exercises. And then moving into after TRX, we move into plyometrics. Now, plyometrics can really be incorporated anytime during strength training as long as you have a good solid foundation of strength training underneath of you. So we're putting it at the end. A lot of times we mix it with the TRX, or like I said, it can really be anytime, just as long as it's not in the very beginning and you need to have a good solid foundation for the plyometrics. Plyometrics is jumping, it's bounding off things, and it can be kind of intense. I recommend if you do have any knee issues, any hip issues, ankle issues, to consult your physician to make sure it's okay that you do these. They can be quite intense. Here's some samples that we have in our library that we like to assign athletes again. Today we're going to look at the box step drop with jumps. And this will be our last video we watch tonight.
Position. And then from there, you work on the most
So there's your sample of your plyometric exercise for tonight. So to tie it all together, let's look at an example. And again, this is going to vary on every athlete and their limiters. It's going to vary on what distance race they're training for, their experience as a triathlete, if you know they're a newbie versus somebody who's been doing this for many years. Somebody who's coming from the gym or has never been in a gym. There's a lot of variations, but this is just one sample of an average everyday Ironman athlete. Looking at a 24-week training plan, 6 months. This would just be one sample. So we're going to do that 2 weeks of adaptation right off the bat. Let's say, you know, they have their annual training plan. We call it a histogram. It's right in front of them. And the day one of training, we're going to also add those that adaptation 3 times a week for 2 weeks for adaptation. And then we'll move right into the 6 weeks of max strength. In base training again, we're still in that aerobic building stage. And then, for example, you know, we're moving into base. So the first 4 weeks of base, depending on how long they're going to be staying in base, a lot of people do spend 12 weeks in base. You know, maybe we'll move into the sports-specific strength training. And then after 12 weeks of base, we're going to move into 8 weeks of build and peak. And so maybe we're going to go another 4 weeks of sports specific strength work. And then finally moving in those last 4 weeks into incorporating the TRX and plyometrics. And then moving into the peak weeks, we're going to take out the gym altogether and just put in the TRX and plyometric. And then finally, those last 2 weeks before the taper and then the race week, we're not going to have any strength training at all. We're going to let the body recover, take out the gym work, and let them have a really great race on a rested body. So I think that's it. Let me see if I can get this bar back, see if anybody has any questions. Hopefully that didn't bore you guys all too much. Okay, so if you do have any questions, go ahead and ask those now. If not, you will be finished for the evening. If you do have any questions, or if you do not have access to the videos and you want to see a particular one, possibly go ahead and email me and I can send that to you. The webinar will also be available for you, and it will be sent to everyone that signed up for the webinar. If you're outside of QT2 and OurRival, if not, it will be forever and ever in our webinar library along with all of our other webinars. We record all of these. We also use a lot of these for our coaches education, so we're all on the same page. So thank you for attending. If you don't have any questions, I'm going to let you guys go, and just email me if something comes up afterwards. I'll give it a couple more minutes just in case anybody thinks of anything, and then we'll close it down and you guys can all go eat dinner and chillax for the night. Do your stretches on your yoga mats in front of the TV. All right, guys, have a good night, and we'll see you on the next webinar.